Welcome everyone to the second part of Business Africa. It is a vast continent full of mineral riches. Unfortunately, Africa today faces various challenges, including poor management of its resources by governments. In its latest report, the UN Economic Commission for Africa presented the results of a study conducted in several countries. Barbara Lundu and Michael Dibe report.
Africa's natural resources remain underexploited because of its governance weaknesses. In the 5th edition of the Report on African Governance published by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, ECA, it appears that achieving sustainable and inclusive growth on the continent remains a difficult task, including creating added value. According to a chief economist of ECA, Abdallah Hakdok, Africa has vast mineral wealth but little added value, which deprive countries of income. The report draws on case studies from 8 countries with different geographies, including Botswana, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Egypt, Madagascar, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Uganda. And among these countries, only Botswana has a long-term development program on the use of its natural resources for the benefit of citizens. The report calls for good governance of natural resources because of illicit financial flows and corruption on the continent. Direct exploitation of natural resources in agriculture, forestry, oil and gas and minerals, which dominate economic activity, has benefited only a tiny minority in many countries. In particular, the report recommends strengthening institutional and regulatory framework to improve transparency and accountability for good governance, essential for sustainable development.
Thank you all for joining us on this week's edition of Business Africa. You can send your questions, comments, and suggestions on Twitter at Mkenga1 and Facebook at Almelnga. You can also follow us on our various social media platforms at Africanews in English and Africanews FR in French. More news continues on Africanews TV and Africanews.com. Goodbye.